Chris Watts, you might have heard of him, American fella, reportedly confessed to murdering his wife, Shanann, who was 15 weeks pregnant with his first son, as well as murdering his 3 and 4-year-old daughters, Bella and Celeste. The footage you're about to see was taken on the 16th of August 2018, and Chris Watts allegedly confessed the next day. Let's have a look at the partial, nonverbal and paralanguage analysis of Chris Watts based on this footage. There are numerous red flags which should seem glaringly obvious in Chris's conduct. There is virtually no display of sadness, grief, or empathy, with one key exception. Slate magazine ran a collage of front pages from different newspapers featuring an identical photograph under the headline, "The Intern Who Took the Defining Photograph of the Dallas Shooting." Out of the thousands of images coming from this tragic news event, what made this photo of a grief-stricken police officer comforting a colleague the defining photograph? If you think back to other traumatic news events, photographs in which people are seen reacting with extreme emotion tend to be the pictures which get reproduced the most and remembered the longest. Do you remember Sir Don McCullum's photograph of a Turkish woman who mourns her dead husband, a victim of the Cyprus civil war between Greek and Turkish Cypriots? Or the grief-stricken student kneeling beside the body of a Kent State student who'd just been shot to death? Maybe you remember the most famous image of the Gujarat riots in 2002, or the napalm-covered terrified children screaming as they run down the road in Vietnam. These are among the most reproduced photos since cameras were invented. When our inner feelings hit a certain energetic peak, our face is uncontrollably configured in a way which communicates a clear, unmodulated emotional truth. This particular photo of the policeman's grief is real and rare. It draws out our own emotions and our own empathy. And it's the empathy that's key here. The policeman's face evokes our own sadness about what's happened to the people that we will never meet in a place we may never have been, but to which nonetheless we feel connected. His face is contorted into the classic grief pattern, eyebrows twisted up in distress, eyes compressed from below, mouth stretched sideways, lips pursed. That's why we have facial expressions, so we can share our deepest feelings, as the police officer in this picture is doing. According to the photographer, he heard sobbing, turned around and shot this photo, but it's not the policeman who was crying, it's the woman whose face we don't see whom he is comforting. The officer's face is in grief because of his empathy for her, which, in turn, inspires our empathy. This is the power of our facial expressions. So let's have a little look at the footage.
Chris, when did you learn that they weren't here? I guess, well, I texted her a few times, called her, I didn't get a response, which that was a little off. And then her friend Nicole showed up about a little afternoon. I could see it on the doorbell camera, and I was like, "Hey, what's going on?" She's like, "I can't get a hold of Shanann." And that's when I was just like, "All right, something's not right. If she's not answering the door, and she said the car was here, it's like, I gotta go home." And we got here, got inside, and nobody was here. Nothing.
And so I read that Shanann was unusual.
Yeah, because like Bella was gonna start kindergarten.
Wait, what? Bella was going to start kindergarten? If we didn't already know the outcome of this case, this would be a very shocking moment. When a parent talks about their child in the past tense, it's not a good sign.
Next Monday, and they were just getting ready to start back again.
They were just getting ready to start back again.
And so what kind of, so your friend Nicole kind of tipped you off at something?
Yeah, because like she was here at the front door, and that's when I kind of knew, okay, like if she's not answering anybody else either, this isn't like her, because I mean she works at direct sales business, and that's what she does. And for her not to respond to any of her people, if she doesn't respond to me, that's fine. I mean, like, she's busy, she's got stuff going on, but not to respond to her people, though, that was not like her.
His behaviour seems bizarre, right? Considering his wife and children are all missing.
Chris, you've got a beautiful family, and it looks like you all love each other very much. What went through your mind the minute kind of you're like, something's wrong?
Like, I was trying to get home as fast as I can. I was blowing through stoplights.
This is an example of a machismo descriptor at a very unusual time.
Something's
Like I was trying to get home as fast as I can. I was blowing through stoplights.
His smiling and his vocal tonality during this sentence are consistent with what would have been a much less important event. Change a few words and it's almost as if he's describing himself at a football game. His depiction also betrays his bias towards hyper-physical acts.
So I was blowing through everything, just trying to get home as fast as I can because none of this made sense. Like, if she wasn't here, like, where did she go? Like, once I got here, it was like, all right, who can I call? Who do I know that she could be with right now? If she went to a friend's house, where could she be staying? And we went through everybody. I mean, just everything in my contact list and her friend's contact list, and nothing has come up. Everybody has said like they haven't heard from her either. I'm just hoping right now that she's somewhere safe, and maybe she's there. But right now it's just like if she's vanished, like I want her back so bad. I want those kids back so bad.
Yeah, looks like it, Chris. You look very grief-stricken. Not only did Chris Watts never cry during this interview, nor did he even exhibit any suppression of tears, but unbelievably, he frequently smiled. Smiling in this setting is extremely out of context. This is a classic display of what is known as duping delight, wherein a person feels a true joy, happiness in their belief that they are fooling you. And Watts smiles out of context many times in this interview. Now he displays a loose tongue jut. This is another signal he showed numerous times during this interview. A loose tongue jut indicates the thought emotions of I've been a bad boy, I've done a stupid thing, I've been cool. Take care not to confuse a loose tongue jut with a tight tongue jut or a wide open tongue jut, for these have entirely different meanings. The journalist asks, I wanted to ask you a bit about the hard part. For the next several seconds, in anticipation of questions implying he was the perpetrator, Watts's rate of blinking increases dramatically. While his blinking dramatically alone does not indicate deception, it does demonstrate significant anxiety. An inward lip roll is a signal of the psyche's attempt to suppress strong emotions from growing. When we see an inward lip roll, we know that the person is trying to sequester their feelings, both from being displayed on their face as well as internally. Thus, an inward lip roll is another crucial anxiety tell, and Chris made this expression many times.
Yeah, I mean,
the grief, sadness, empathy expression requires an elevated central forehead contraction, simultaneous with a mouth of sadness.
Yeah, I mean, not everybody's gonna have their own opinion on anything like this.
He stutters, stammers, and mispronounces during his answer. As he's trying to say the word nothing, he momentarily displays a mild grief expression, although both his mouth and forehead components in this instance are quite minimal. Crucially, this facial expression was in response to the journalist saying, "You're afraid people think you may have done something." Thus, Watts's only display of sadness, grief during this entire interview was when he was confronted with the prospect that he was the perpetrator of the crime. His grief was for himself, not for his missing family. We could stop this analysis right here, for Watts's lack of sadness, grief, empathy is profound and cannot be overstated.
I just want people to know that I want my family back. Like, I want them safe, and I want them here. Like, this house is not the same. I mean, last night was traumatic. Last night was, I can't really stay in this house again, like, with nobody here.
While an innocent man would certainly feel alone and miss his family, Watts most likely did not want to be in the house because that's where he murdered his wife and children. And it's much too direct a reminder.
And last night I wanted that knock on the door. I wanted to see this kid run in, just barrel rush me and just give me a hug and knock me on the ground.
That was another example of Watts's overt tendency towards physicality. This physical verbal hyperbole in this context is completely out of place.
But that didn't happen.
What are you going to say tonight?
probably my friends Nick and Amanda. Unless something develops in the next hours or so, like I'm hoping that somebody sees something or somebody knows something and comes forward.
What's the hardest part of all of this for you?
Not knowing, like if they're safe or if they're in trouble. Like there's just that variable. Like I'm not sure. I can't do anything right now from where I'm at. Like I'm not sure if they're safe somewhere, just huddled up somewhere, or if they're in trouble.
Huddled up somewhere. This is another very odd and out of context description. Yet another red flag.
And knowing that if they could be in trouble, it's earth shattering right now, and it doesn't feel like it's real.
The weird part of all of this, it sounds like everything's kind of locked up. There's no sign of them leaving the house.
No, like we have camera there. Neighbor has camera. Everything's checked out.
Do you have a camera? You said?
The doorbell, only one right there. The neighbor has one over there.
Were all the doors around the house locked?
Front door was locked. The garage door was unlocked, but that's normal for, like, when she comes in the house, she leaves it unlocked just so she can come in and out just in case, to get in the garage door, but the back sliding door was locked as well.
So how would she have left the house if she did leave the house? Or
I don't want to put anything out there, like just suspecting, like if something like somebody pulled in the back, and because we have a driveway back there from the new townhomes, but it's so hard to tell. Like there's no cameras in the backyard or anything like that, so it's really hard to even suspect anything right now as far as how she could have left, or if someone came picked her up, or if someone took her.
Meanwhile, today's reality, you got cops there, cops here, cops in your house, K9 units.
I've never seen something like this in my lifetime unless it was on TV or a movie, and this doesn't seem real at all. It just seems like I'm living in a nightmare and I can't get out of it. I just want them home so bad.
Did you see your kids and your wife when that, or you had the kids, I forgot.
Yeah, I had the kids over the weekend.
Did you see your wife when she got home?
She got home really late, about 2 a.m. from the airport when she got back from Arizona.
Did you wake up and say,
No. I saw her when she got in, but it was really quick just because it was 2 a.m. in the morning. But I saw the kids in the monitor before I left, and that was it.
What kind of efforts are happening right now, Chris, to find them?
Right now, I'm in Frederick Police Department.
Throughout the vast majority of this interview, he keeps his arms folded in a self-hugging configuration. This nonverbal sign is associated with the beta emotions of the need for protection, self-comforting, and low confidence.
They've been on point. With the officers, detectives, sergeants, K9 units here, they're getting sense. So hopefully they can pick up something and kind of go in a direction that lacks.
As he says the word lead, Watts displays a classic fear expression. His mouth corners are directed laterally and downward, and his neck muscles tighten. While the contraction and elevation of the entire width of his forehead are not required for this expression of fear, in this cluster context, his forehead contraction acts as a fear amplifier.
Lead us to where maybe they're at right now.
Another dramatic red flag is Watts's complete lack of any facial touching. An innocent person with at least an average level of empathy, whose 2 children and pregnant wife just vanished, would be rubbing their face frequently. Typically, this occurs with both hands covering the mouth or via bilateral eye covering eye rubbing or rubbing of both cheeks. When an empathetic person sees, hears, or is mentally digesting an event of high emotional impact, although their intellectual, rational brain may be aware of what has happened or is currently occurring, their emotional brains are still processing the information and its ramifications. Lack of facial rubbing in such a setting is dramatically abnormal. The only time he touched his head, not his face, which is an important distinction, was with his left hand above the left side of his forehead, just after he said, K9 units here, they're getting sense, so hopefully they can pick something up and kind of go in the direction that will actually lead us to where maybe they are right now. Touching on the top or back of the head is highly associated with anxiety. Even though he lies many times during this interview, at this moment his anxiety is honest. He is deeply worried.
Yeah.
Shanann went to. Where'd you get that shirt?
Oh, this is I think she got it off Amazon, but this is my favorite college sports team.
Wasn't she just there?
She was just in North Carolina.
Intriguingly, after the journalist changes subjects and asks him about his shirt, he can be seen hooking his thumbs on the lower openings of his pockets. This signal indicates a high confidence along with feelings of virility. Just for a moment, he is putting what he perceives as manliness and his sexuality on display. If his family was safe and the subject of the interview would have been something mundane, this change in his dynamic would perhaps be more understandable. Yet in the context of his missing daughters and pregnant wife, the shift of his emotional tone is a monumental warning sign.
Yep. So she actually probably got it.
The vocal tone he adopts in describing his garment is quite odd, and again, out of context. Notice his choice of words as well. I like these shirts, a lot. Her question was probably by design, and if so, she was clever to use this tactic.
And there, usually she gets stuff from Amazon, but this one, I like these shirts a lot.
You guys, you love your girl. Describe your little girls to us, and
So this Celeste,
The other journalist, who is no doubt experiencing empathy and pain, asks Chris to describe his girls. Watts immediately resumes his self-hugging posture. Notice too that Watts' side-to-side motion, evident to varying degrees in this video, increases significantly towards the end. This is a common dynamic seen when a person is anxious and is subconsciously attempting to burn off anxiety-related adrenaline.
she's just a ball of energy. Call her Rampage, because she's just always, she's got two speeds, go or she's sleeping. And she's always a troublemaker. She's always the one jumping off things, just yelling at you and all kinds of things. And Bella, she's the more calm, cautious, mothering type. And she's more like me, she's more calm.
Describing his daughter Celeste as Rampage, and she's always the troublemaker, and likening her to his wife's demeanour, while claiming Bella, the calm, cautious mothering type, and she's more like me, she's more calm, is an attempt to distance himself from suspicion. This comparison seems to be a subconscious attempt to rationalise his behaviour.
Celeste has definitely got her mom's personality where she's always just gung-ho, ready to go.
His neck muscles tighten in a classic fear display. This neck of fear is accompanied by a hard swallow, a signal of a dry mouth and throat, further anxiety signals. In addition to his body language tells, he displays numerous statement analysis red flags. Watts never says the word love. His complete absence of this emotional descriptor when speaking about Shanann, Celeste or Bella is alarming. Ironically, the male journalist spoke of Watts' love for his family twice in this interview. His dramatic overuse of the word like is a signal of his anxiety and is a tic-type verbal analog behaviour. You may have noticed that Chris Watts spoke about himself and what he wanted, but he didn't speak about the feelings of his wife or his children. A person with little or no empathy defaults to himself in both language and deed. You may have noticed that he's not wearing his wedding ring in this interview, yet in family photos he does wear a ring on his finger. So in conclusion, during this interview, Chris Watts repeatedly smiles out of context and shows a lack of contextual emotional processing. He displays anxiety, fear, excessive adrenaline, deception signals, egocentricity, defaults towards physicality, a virility display, the need for protection and other beta emotional tones, an absence of love and complete lack of empathy. He has reportedly already confessed to murdering his children Bella and Celeste, as well as his pregnant wife Shanann. Throughout this video, there are multiple non-verbal tells and statement analysis signals which, if he had not already confessed, would have pointed us towards his guilt. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more statement and body language analysis videos, don't forget to subscribe. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, and I'd love to hear your comments. Peace!